All right, so now we still have only dealt with grayscale, with black, white, and now I did a background fill of gray, which is not very inspiring looking. Most of the images I got online were already grayscale images. Especially the patent stuff is just a grayscale bitmap, black and white image. And I can see that in the mode of my image. So when you look at your file bar up here with the full name, it's telling me the percentage I'm looking at the pixels, which should be a low percentage because if I view it at full scale, that's kind of print resolution. So that's really big. But then it will also tell me what mode the image is, and it's a gray 8-bit mode. And I don't want gray, I want color. So how do I change that? I go to Image, Mode, RGB Color. This is the standard red, green, blue color that your monitors show us. This gives you millions of color options. It's what we'll mostly use in Photoshop. And then when it asks me if I want to merge layers, of course I don't want to merge my layers. So it's kind of weird that it asks. But be careful and don't merge, because otherwise you would lose all of that working data that we've combined. Okay, so now that allows me to change my background, not just into black, white, or gray, but I could go to Edit, Fill, Color. And I can use these color selectors, either here in the color window, or here using the spectrum and then the value sliders, and pick a color and fill it in. And color is nice, but even more interesting than a color background might be a gradated background. And so if I look at the paint bucket tool, which will also allow me to paint with a color, so if I change it to something like this and just use the paint bucket, that will fill in that layer with a color. But underneath the paint bucket tool is the gradient tool. You know, in that same, I think of these as tool drawers. And the gradient tool has options, just like any other tool. And I can pick, let's see, the most gaudy is a rainbow. And I can pick whether it's a linear gradation, like this, or whether it's a radial gradation, like a sunburst, like this, or these other kind of gemstone, soft and hard combinations, or a tilt shift, or a diamond-shaped. All of those are interesting. But what most people don't take the time to do with gradients is to double-click on them and then get to the gradient editor. And this is an incredibly powerful tool because you can decide how long each of the colors is in the spectrum. You can decide the order of them. So let's swap it around there. And then when I draw the gradient, look how different it is with the same tool. You can also pick your own colors for your gradient, and you can delete colors from the gradient. The rainbow is a nice one to start with because it gives you a lot of options. But maybe you want them all to be cool colors. So let me get rid of these warms. And what if I want to add a color? Well, I just click on that scale and I replace the color with something I want. And I can move them around. I can even play with their individual capabilities here and how chunky they are. And maybe this one is just too dark, so I'll go a little bit brighter there. Maybe this one's just a little bit too strong. I'll go a little bit brighter there. Push it way to the edge. Okay, so now I've got a gradient tool that's customized. And I click and drag in the direction I want the gradient to go. And I get something like that. And if I click and drag further, the gradient will be more spread out. If I click and drag shorter, it will be less spread out. And then because it's on its own layer behind, I can also play with its opacity. Make it a little bit less intense, very subtle. But the problem is I see the checkerboard. So I'm going to add another layer using the Post-it, and I'm going to do Edit Fill, and I'm going to fill that layer with white, 100% white paper. And then I'm going to move that underneath my gradient background fill, and that allows my opacity, I'm able to see it how it would print. So maybe I just want a little bit of color. And then what's even more fun is I can take that color fill layer and I can select it and hit Command T, and then I can transform it. I can stretch it. So even though I did a radial gradient, which is perfect circles, now I can stretch them into lopsided oblong ovals, make them my own kind of shape. If I want that pink to be longer, I can do that. And then we'll get into more complex transform tools with our next exercise. So that's a nice looking background. That's interesting. But for this project, I don't want you to color the background. I want you to color the line work. That's what we're going to do this semester. So let me put this back up to 100%. And now I'm going to keep that white background sheet, but I'm going to select my color layer, or my line work layer. And I'm going to use the magic wand again, and I'm going to select all the empty space around my blacks with contiguous turned off, just like I did when I deselected the whites. But there's a big difference this time. Now I'm going to go up to select, the select options at the top of the screen, and I'm going to say inverse. The shortcut for that is Shift Command I, but I just tend to go to select inverse. And what that did is it swapped it. Now it didn't select the white behind or the empty space behind. It selected all of the other content. Even if it wasn't all black, it would be everything that is there is now selected. Now remember, selections are movable, right? So now while it's selected, I'm going to turn off the eyeball on my line work layer. So now I just have an empty selection of where the line work used to be. And then I'm going to select my background color layer. And what I'm going to do is take that selection and copy it into its own layer, like making a stamp. And you could do copy paste. You could do Command C, Command V, but in Photoshop that offsets your paste. So you know that you've made a copy, it kind of moves it a little bit. If you want to duplicate though, just stamp it right in the same place, you hit Command J. So Command J is duplicate. So once I have my line work selected but turned off, and now I'm on my background layer, when I hit Command J, it will isolate it onto a new layer. And it did it, but I can't see it because I still see the background color layer. So if I turn off the background color layer, I'll see that color line work on white. It's a little confusing, so let me do it again. But I'm going to save my work because this is the end product we want. So I'm going to hit Command S just to save it, or I can go to File, Save. And now I'm going to show you another way you might color it. I'm going to go to a Google image search, and I want to look for a cool color pattern, cartoony. Doesn't really matter what you put in. If you do an image search, our design culture is so abundant that there's just cool stuff out there that designers put at full resolutions for you to use. So I want to look for 10 megapixels or bigger. And I could look for anything this way, any kind of texture or color. See what's there to use. So I have like purple textures, starbursts. This pixel thing is a little annoying, but it will make a good example. So I'm going to open that in a new tab. I'm going to, because this is the newest version of Photoshop, I don't even need to save it to the desktop. I can just click it here from its full resolution and drop it into my project. And now I'm going to take that image, and you can see why we need 10 megapixels or bigger. And I'm going to transform it to cover my whole image, like so. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take my black lines, use the magic wand, select in the empty space, go to select inverse, so it's selecting all the content that is there, uncheck the eyeball, move the layer selection down to my new pattern, and then hit Command J to duplicate it onto its own layer. So that's what that pattern looks like put on. And now I have two. I have that one and this one, and I can play with their opacity, kind of play them against each other to get something that looks a little bit more dynamic and interesting. Woo. Just like I could do that with the backgrounds, play with the opacity, play these against each other to get something a little bit more dynamic and interesting. And there's so much more we could do, but this is all I need from this exercise. Okay, now that I have this is the final step. Once I've saved it as a PSD file with all my layers, now I want to make it an online file type that I can upload to PhotoBucket and turn in. But I do not want to have the white background showing for this. I want it to be a clean cutout that's just color, like a logo. So I'm going to turn off my white background layer, so you see the checkerboard. And then I'm going to say File, Save As. And unlike last time when we saved as a JPEG, this time I want to save it as a PNG file. PNG is just like a JPEG. It's an online file format, a loss compression format. It moves everything into one layer, but it supports transparency. So it will allow me to have empty space. And where do I want to save that to? The desktop. So I'm going to navigate it to the desktop so I can see when it saves. So even though I've been saving my Photoshop file back to the organized folder, this is a new thing I'm creating. I want to save it to the desktop so I can upload it. And then we'll be done. So hit F11, see that it's on the desktop. I don't see it yet. It's still saving. For some reason, the newest versions of Photoshop, PNGs take them a little bit of time. And sometimes I have to goose it along. And the way I do that is I save it. I go to File, Save As, and I just resave it as a Photoshop file and replace my old one. And that kind of tricks it into saving the PNG faster. It gets a little hung up in the process. But F11, there is my PNG right there. How do I know it's a PNG and not a JPEG? When I double click it and open it in preview, I'll see it with a gray background instead of a white background. That gray is not really there. It's just showing me a default background. And when I put it into a website, it would show whatever the background of the website was behind it. So now I'm going to go to PhotoBucket, which can be found under our links. This is how we turn work in. This is our first exercise worth points. And all the login information is there. But if we're using Chrome, it should just remember us. Remember, you look for this, and then you know you're in the right place. Then you go to Library. Then you go to Digital Art 1. Then you go to Exercises. And this is Exercise 1, the cartoon jumble. So you're going to click on that. It's empty right now.
No, it's not.
Okay, it's nearly empty. Oh, it was empty. Yeah. So I need to move these. These are old ones. I'll show you, if you put your stuff into the wrong place, this is how you move them. It's a little annoying. But you can select multiple if you need to. And I'm going to move those into the past student examples so that we can add our own now. La la la. All right, PhotoBucket isn't wanting to move files at the moment. It can be glitchy, but I want to add it into this folder. So what I can do is I can click to upload, and because I saved my PNG file to my desktop, it should be easy to find. There it is. Notice it doesn't have a white background. It's just whatever this background is. And I say open, and it will upload it. But remember, that's just the first step in uploading to PhotoBucket. The next step is I have to title it with my name in order to get credit for it.
Now you can do the, yeah.
So once it loads,